Hey, welcome back to Virginia This Morning. Interesting conversation coming up. Being micromanaged and dealing with incompetence are two things that many people have to deal with in a work environment. Well, our next guest offers an artistic diplomatic approach on what you can do if you are faced with this situation in his new book, Toxic Boss Blues. And we welcome Steve Neal to Virginia This Morning. Great to see you, Steve.
Good morning.
And congratulations on the book as well.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Let's take you back a few years. Why did you want to get into law enforcement? Because you spent almost 30 years with a police department in Chesterfield, right?
I did. I retired after nearly 30 years police work. But interestingly enough, I didn't take the normal path to police work. When I was a teenager, I got in a little trouble in my hometown, which was not around this region. But I did not like the way the police treated us during that particular arrest. They were a little rough to us. They talked to us a little bit rough. So I decided that I needed to be in the police business and maybe I could make a difference.
Okay, along the way, tell us where you came up with the idea for this book.
Well, you know, I spent my entire career, almost 30 years, trying to be respectful and trying to treat people well and trying to do things the right way. And during the course of my career, I ran into several people who did not do things the same way that I thought it ought to be done. And that kind of led me to end up writing this book after I retired.
Now, somebody picking up this book, I mean, you see a silhouette of a police officer. This is not necessarily just for members of law enforcement.
No, one thing I want to make sure that everybody understands is I am not a police hater. I'm not a police basher by any means. I love the police.
No.
I am the police. You know, that was my career.
You live and breathe it.
Yeah, so my book is very respectful to police officers who do their job well. But there are some, unfortunately, in the business who are toxic and who don't do what they ought to do. And those are the people that I'm calling out in this book.
All right, how does someone actually deal with a toxic boss if they have been under the thumb of that person for many, many years?
Well, you know, it depends on what that particular individual is doing to them. You know, I chronicle in this book several different types of toxic bosses. So there's bullies and there's incompetence, there's micromanagers, there's a number of different types. So it's going to depend on what particular type of boss that you're dealing with as to what type of behaviors you want to use to deal with them.
Kind of advice for people?
Well, the best advice, in my view, is if you're dealing with a toxic boss, you need to make sure that you do your job well. You have to be doing everything right because some of these people are going to be picking on employees and they're going to be going after them. So you have to do everything well. The second big piece that I would advise is if you're fighting this battle, you need to document everything that you do. You know, if there are audio or videotapes, then of course that's sound evidence if the situation deteriorates to the point where you need to fight it, where it becomes some type of administrative battle or even a legal battle. So I think the second most important piece is to make sure that you document everything that goes on, who said what, and when it was said, how it was said, and exactly what happened. Because sometimes some of these toxic bosses will deny what took place. You know, sometimes they'll say, I never said that, or, you know, they'll do things that are not the way it ought to be done at all.
What was the writing process like, Steve? Did it come naturally for you?
You know, I struggled a bit with the writing, but the advantage that I had was I was writing about something that I was really passionate about. This issue, as I said, I've been dealing with since I was a teenager, and I always tried to be respectful, always tried to do the right thing to people. So I had a very strong passion about this particular topic, and therefore I ended up writing about things that I knew.
Well, you're talking about Toxic Boss Blues now, and from the employee's standpoint, but do you think there are some things that maybe a boss can learn from this book as well?
There's no doubt. There's no doubt, because there are what I call antidotes in this book. And the antidotes and survival tactics are ways that you can actually make it through a situation like this. And there's no question that there are things that people on both sides of the issue can learn. And indeed, as you mentioned earlier, this book is not just to law enforcement personnel. I don't think there's anybody who hasn't worked for a toxic boss, some more so than others. So some of the tips and some of the artistic and respectful leadership tactics that are in this book, I think, will be advantageous to all.
Do you have to take action if you find yourself in that situation, or just hope and pray that it goes away?
Well, you know, I think that's a great question. I think a lot of people choose to hope and pray that it goes away, but the truth of the matter is that very rarely happens. And again, that's one of the reasons why I detail some very specific steps in this book about what you can do to actually survive this encounter. You know, when you're talking about a toxic boss, you're talking about people of different power levels. So you're talking about a supervisor, someone who may control your job, your career, your promotions and advancements. So you have to be a certain way that you need to deal with that situation in order to survive it.
His name is Steve Neal. The book, Toxic Boss Blues. We wish you well, Steve.
Thank
Congratulations.
You.
All
Thank
right,
you,
best
sir.
of luck. Jess will send it on over.